I'm sorry.
It wasn't exactly. I thought I need to try to put
No, I won't do that.
They did on their ready. I do everything on my feet.
Yes. Well, I reckon if it solves the problem, I recognize the honourable member for number 6.
He's the one you ought to remember standing. He's declined. He's got it away. So, you defer to me. Mr. Speaker, thank you for giving me the opportunity post-lunch to make my contribution on the bill shortly entitled Children Care and Protection Amendment Bill 2021. And I do so, Mr. Speaker, out of an abundance of concern that we here in this Parliament, I'm sure, have, and the people of St. Kitts and Nevis generally have, regarding the welfare of our children. Now, when I listened earlier today, especially to the contribution that was being made by the Honourable Member for Nevis 10, he spoke very passionately of the situation of our children, and it would appear as though it was from his own knowledge and appreciation of what has been happening for some time, not only in the island of Nevis, but also in the island of St. Kitts. He spoke passionately on what the situation has been for some time, just as the member for St. Christopher 8 and the Senator Minister spoke as well, and basically outlined that the situation, of course, would have worsened because of the COVID-19 pandemic situation. In fact, I listened attentively, and the case was being made that there would have been, over the last 12 to 15 months, that we have been confronted with COVID, that the number of cases of abused children in our country would have increased. One therefore has to ask the question, why is this happening? And it makes it therefore more timely for us to be here today to discuss this critical matter. I believe that what Senator Clark on this side was seeking to do earlier when she spoke, although I think she was misunderstood. Senator Clark was basically saying that the notice for the meeting, from what I saw and what I received, was dated, I think, the 28th day of July. It is maybe adequate time, maybe adequate days, even though there were 2 holidays intervening. But I don't think Dr. Clark was arguing that point. What I think she was saying was that This is an important piece of legislation that is coming before us at a critical time when we ourselves recognize in this very house that the situation with regard to the protection of our children has become more urgent than ever before. And all that the good senator was attempting to do was saying, here we are. Even though it is in time of the 7 days, but I know that my letter is not in time. But I'm not going to argue that. But even if it was in time, in the 7 clear days, including, of course, the holidays, the matter is so urgent to us as parliamentarians that she was basically saying, I hope we would have received this earlier so that we can do justice to the legislation in its discussion today. Especially when this piece of legislation is brought before us today for the first time. When there was no earlier reading called the first reading. The first reading was done this morning. We are now on the second reading on the same day. Yet, it is a critically important piece of legislation because it deals with the protection of our children, and we have all concluded this morning that they need protection, especially during this COVID pandemic time. So I just want to say that Dr. Clark meant no offense to anyone. She just simply wanted to say, I wish we had more time, because it is so important that we have to rush it through this parliament. 3 sittings, 3 readings in 1 sitting, which is unusual. Of course, the movement may say it's important. So that's why we have to do the 3 sittings. But at least give us adequate notice. And even if you feel that strongly that it is urgent, but still give us enough time. Let us come back next week, the week after, so that we would be in a position to adequately deal with the changes that are being proposed in this new and amended legislation. So I wanted to make that point very, very clear. Mr. Speaker, why is this so urgent? The COVID-19 pandemic has affected us in several different ways. I am pleased that the government has come today as the executive in the parliament to ensure that something is done to protect our children. But why do our children need this exceptional protection during COVID-19 pandemic? You know why? Because the homes of these children, even if before they were unsafe, many of them have become more unsafe during the COVID-19 pandemic. We understand that there is continuing spousal abuse. We understand that when you have a family where the husband and the wife, the 2 partners, were working and they are no longer working, or their hours of work have been severely truncated, this creates tension. The emotions are strained. Tensions will occur. There might be physical abuse. There might be, of course, mental abuse. There might be sexual abuse. And of course, the children in the middle are also abused. And that is what the problem is. The situation in the country has changed dramatically. So it is important for us to be here to discuss this piece of legislation today. But is it enough to simply bring this legislation to protect our children? But what about protecting their parents, their guardians? A lot of what is happening in the homes today is as a result of the stress of the parents and guardians. Why are they stressed? They are being sent home since last year, March. Some of them have never worked. And even those who were expected to receive some support, the government outlined a package, but they tell you it has been such difficulties experienced to get the package. Those who might have been severed, the severance payment. Yes, I raised it sometime last month, I think it was, when we were here. Senator, who is the minister, said only a few people are still to be paid their severance payments. That's good if it is true. But people say it's not true. And so, Mr. Speaker, the situation really, but I don't know. I have not been severed. But they say that the senator minister is not being truthful. I don't know. But that is what they said when I went outside. She said 25 more people. But they said can't be, because a whole factory of 60-something people said, but we have not been paid our severance payments. They said it, yes. Yeah. Well, those who work collectively, a lot of them are in my constituency, and they said, Dr. Douglas, we ain't getting no severance, none of us in the factory. So I have to believe them.
I agree. They get it now? They got back to work. They get it now? The work is. That was it. They got back to work.
They got back to work? Not when the statement was made. They were at home. It's okay, we'll come to that. So, Mr. Speaker, the point I am trying to make is that people are experiencing difficulties. The salaries and the wages and the severance payments have not been made adequately. There are some people today, people sent me this morning before I came here, that is why I was delayed, a whole lot of WhatsApp with letters from employers expressing the unfortunate situation that they cannot employ them any longer because they have to be dealing with cruise ships. And as long as they are to deal with cruise ships and they're not vaccinated, they are terminated. That cannot be right. And so I appeal. The government needs, we here on this side want to work with you on that side to protect our workers. They feel they are not being protected. They feel that they are abandoned. We need to do something, because when they are not being protected, then they take it out on their children. So we are here today to protect their children, but what about protecting them? That is what I think the question must be. How do we protect them? Is the government doing everything that is necessary to protect the employees in the private sector? Look at what the taxmen are saying. Cruise ships have come back. But it is within a bubble. And then I was saying, Dr. Douglas, the bubble has become smaller If it is a big bubble, fine. But when it is a smaller bubble, how are they going to survive? All we are doing is a strong appeal to the government to help to protect our workers. Some in the private sector, in the public sector, were being threatened. They were being threatened. Some of them have been punished. I saw some photographs of some young men and women who were in the army, at the Coast Guard, moved out from the safety and security and the decency of where they are accustomed to sleep and placed into an unfinished building without any amenities, tables and beds thrown on the side, an unfinished building up there at the Coast Guard. That's where the physical, that is where the police and the army, I would say, place them, because they are not vaccinated. So we are developing here in this country a class, a segregated system. Apartheid is what they call it. Vaccination apartheid. Some people who vaccinated treated in one way, others not vaccinated treated in a different way. In the same country, in the same workplace. That is not supposed to happen. Who could tell me to do it? When I was coming in a few weeks ago, somebody told me, boy, you can't go into parliament. You ain't vaccinated. I said, let it stop me. I mean, we have to protect our people. We must protect our workers, irrespective of where they are working, whether in the private sector or in the public sector. They deserve protection, not just these children who are in the abused homes, the elders, the adults, the workers. They need protection as well. And it is for the government's duty, in my opinion, to ensure that the workers are protected. We will join with you on that one. The people need protection, not just children, adults, employees, private, public sector. They need protection. And when they go to lawyers to take up their cases, because they have cases, legal, good cases, the lawyers are shying away. It seems as though the lawyer is afraid. The lawyers are afraid of the dictatorial tendencies of this administration. And that is wrong. When a people believe that they can't conduct their professional duties for fear of retribution from the government, we are not in a good place. We are not in a good place. It is not right for workers to feel that way. It is not right for lawyers who are supposed to give them the kind of legal protection when they are not taking the cases because they don't want to get into confrontation with the government. That is not a good place for St. Kitts and Nevis to be in at this time. Because this pandemic is going to last for a long time.
Mr. Speaker, on a point of order.
You say you ain't going to talk, you know. No, you're on a point of order.
I'm not talking really. I think it's unfortunate that the member for number 6 is having a broadside on lawyers, attorneys.
No. With respect, Mr. Speaker, I am not doing, let me correct him before he goes further. I am not doing that at all. Those red herrings will not work. I am not having any broadside attack on lawyers. I am saying the government has failed to protect the people of our country.
The point of order, Mr. Speaker, and I stand up as the Attorney General to say that for lawyers to be said that they're not taking cases from people because they're afraid, I think it's wrong to say so. Because it's a both side on lawyers in this country. To say that the legal fraternity does not have the backbone, are afraid to take cases in the country. And I think you need to apologize to lawyers in this country.
To the lawyers?
To lawyers.
I think you should apologize to them. You as the Attorney General, you have a duty to make them feel comfortable to do their duties, to protect people. You are the Attorney General. You should be the one to give them comfort, not me. You. And there has to be something wrong if you, the Attorney General, do not see it fit that it is your duty and the duty of this government to protect the working class people of St. Kitts and Nevis.
But you said lawyers.
They have gone to lawyers, they have told me, we have sent cases to the lawyers, we've been there, and the lawyers are not taking our cases. They don't want to get into any conflict with the government. That is what I said, and that's a fact. Feel bad about it? Yeah. If I was a lawyer, I would take on the cases and win them. That is what I would have done if I were a lawyer. Because it is outright wrong. It is a violation of the existing laws that protect our workers here in St. Kitts and Nevis. And so, Mr. Speaker, I am pleased that we are here to discuss how we can make this piece of existing legislation more robust, more applicable, so that now that we are challenged more than before with regard to the protection of our children, the abuse that they are experiencing, that we also need to take into consideration the protection of our workers who are being thrown out of their jobs because they have not been vaccinated. It is wrong. I've said it before and I say it again. It is wrong. And it is for the government to do something, not for the government to encourage employers to take whatever action that they feel like. That is wrong. And that is what I'm saying, because that is what we've heard from this government, that the employers can take whatever action that they would wish to take if they are not vaccinated on protection of their jobs and of their places of work.
The member for number 6 cannot come here and say that the government has encouraged employers to do so. That has never happened in this country. Do not say that.
Mr. Speaker.
You know it's not true.
Mr. Speaker, there is, Mr. Speaker, a video of the Prime Minister himself saying that the employers have a right to take whatever action is necessary to protect their places of employment and other workers who are vaccinated. I have seen it and I'll send it to you, Mr. Speaker. You are disingenuous. Because you know it's there. You know it's out there.
Come on.
You know it's out there. Come on, what?
Mr. Speaker, I don't have to repeat myself.
I didn't expect us to come to this,
the member of number 6 should not be saying this. Should not be saying this. You know it's not true.
Mr. Speaker, I don't want to dwell on this because that is not my main thrust here in this debate this afternoon. Because the world knows, the citizens of St. Kitts and Nevis, they know what they heard, they know what they saw, because I saw it, I heard it, and it did not look like our Prime Minister. It was our Prime Minister. There was no look-alike there. It was him who was saying that. But let me move on. Of course we will.
Yes, we should move on.
So, Mr. Speaker, the theme is really protection of our people. Some of those very people who are foster parents, they are employees who are being sent home. I'm not asking you, I'm telling you.
They need to be adopted. Child adoption bill.
Well, that is why we are moving from being foster to adoption. That is why we are here. So take it easy. It's going to happen. That's why you brought the bill. That's why you brought the bill. That we want to move away from just simply foster homes, foster parents, to fully adopted. Isn't it so? That's why we are here. So that is what I'm saying. But whether or not they are foster or they are adopted parents, they have been sent home, have nothing to eat, no income, no wage, no salary to look after the very children who out of the goodness of their hearts, they have moved to become part of their families. And so, Mr. Speaker, I want to make it absolutely clear that... Sorry? Of course I support the bill. I must support the bill. But I'm telling you that there are other things you need to do. Not just come up with a bill and rush it to the parliament. 3 readings in 1 sitting. When you know how important it is. That's what I'm saying. That is what Dr. Clark was saying. You don't rush it through. Give time for people to really research it and see exactly how we can make tangible contribution to the debate today. Mr. Speaker, I want to also quickly look at one of the other issues that arose during the earlier presentations by members. Because you see, I believe that, and I'm not saying it facetiously, I'm not doing that. I believe that the mover of the bill lost somewhere the thrust of the bill. Because you see, if I remember, and if I look at the parent legislation, Mr. Speaker, it speaks to, the parent legislation speaks to 2 critical areas. It speaks to care and adoption, but it speaks to adoption, and it speaks to care and protection. And when we thought that there was a mix-up with regard to the role and function of the director, I think it is because the member number 8 mixed up these 2 specific roles and functions of the legislation.
You didn't understand plain English?
You didn't understand what you read.
All right.
I'm telling you. Because you see, in that portion of the bill, parent bill I'm talking about, that speaks to care and protection, the director reports to the board.
I'm glad you know that.
The director reports to the board.
Yes.
The director, of course, will speak to the issues that would have been researched, that would allow a determination to be made whether a home is adequate for foster parental accommodation, and whether the person who made the application, him or herself, are adequately qualified to become foster parents. Mr. Speaker, there is need for clarification when you come to wind up on this critical matter that was being spoken to earlier. The second important
Which matter?
the matter of the care and protection, role and responsibility of the bill, and the adoption. The adoption part, Mr. Speaker, is where I think the problem may lie. The chairman does not report to the board. The chairman of the committee. That is what you were saying this morning with regard to when it comes to the adoption.
They should show you the section.
You must show me the section that you refer to. You show me the section.
Where's the bill?
The bill is here, but you show me it. You tell me where in this piece of legislation it speaks to, it speaks to the chairman speaking to reporting back to the board. It doesn't happen, and you know that.
Chairman is- Hey, go ahead.
Where in this does it say? Maybe it is a practice in the ministry, but it is not legislated. It is not. The chairman sits he sits on as the chair of the adoption committee. He sits there as the chair of the adoption committee. There it is determined which child is to be adopted.
Where's your bill that you're passing?
Well, you see now, but you are making references to it which are wrong. You have wrong references to it.
Go ahead.
That is why I'm correcting you. And you should give me some credit because I know the bill.
So you mean it,
So, Mr. Speaker, let me continue. You're disturbing me. Don't disturb me.
pass up that bill.
The chairman, Mr. Speaker, I make the point again, he does not report to the board as they're trying to make us believe when it comes to the adoption of children. Adoption. Because remember, the piece of legislation speaks to two critical functions or components: care and protection and adoption. With the adoption part, he sits as the chair of the adoption committee. There it is determined which child is up for adoption and which child or which children are not approved for adoption. Also, it is determined here which parents are deemed qualified to adopt our children and which parents are not qualified to adopt our children. So, Mr. Speaker, why we say that this is an anomaly? Because the director has responsibility over the administrative staff. I mean, if I am wrong, tell me, I'll pause. The director has, and we're not knocking the director at all. Don't get us wrong, we're not. What we are saying is that what was said this morning appears to be wrong and mixed up, and it needs to be clarified. Because it does not have basis in law. He has responsibility, or she has responsibility over the administrative staff. The same administrative staffs, they are the one writing the reports. For him to sit on the committee as the chairman, we are saying that this is in conflict, serious conflict, the point which was being made earlier this morning. We are not knocking anything, but we are saying that it has to be clearly understood. And if you're going to give roles and responsibilities to people, then it should be within the four walls of the legislation. And it is not, because you have not pointed it out to us, and I'm asking you when you come up again to do it, because it's not there. It is therefore very, very important that we avoid conflict on matters of this kind. It is not correct for that to take place. It's like a judge in an appeal court. He is doing the appeal, the final appeal. But at the same time, he is directing the police officer who has done the investigation. It can't work like that. There has to be a separation. And all that we are saying, the legislation is good, the amendment is good, it is well-intentioned, but the explanation that was being given this morning, it is flawed. And we are asking that it be corrected as quickly as possible. One other point I think I needed to make is that of the matter of the review panel. According to my understanding, is that the review panel is brought into being on a case-by-case basis. I am not certain if this is the best arrangement. A lot of them are public servants. I'm not knocking them. All I'm saying, I don't know if this is the best arrangement for us. And maybe what could be required is a panel that is fully established so that it is there permanently, that is with limited time of operation. But to bring the panel together in what I describe as an ad hoc way may not be the best arrangement for a review panel of this kind. It needs to be permanent, Mr. Speaker, just as the committee is permanent. That is all we are saying. Let it be permanent, as the committee is permanent, with permanent members, then let the review panel be of permanent members and give it permanence. That is all we are saying. We're not even criticizing. We are suggesting how to improve the legislation so that it can be most effective in delivering the protection that we are saying is needed for our children. Mr. Speaker, as the mover of the bill, member for number 8 would note, there is supposed to be significant, comprehensive review of the operation of within the walls of the legislation. Because of where we are, because we are seeing increasing numbers of children being abused, and there is this long delay that we've had for reasons which I understand. We believe that there should be these important reviews so that the minister should be able, on the review documents he would have received, make critical decisions and changes accordingly. If the minister has not been overseeing these important reviews, then there is a dereliction of duty on the part of the minister. And to avoid that, or to prevent that from continuing, I'm asking that the minister adheres to the stipulations of the law and insists that there be frequent reviews so that we do not fall into traps of extended periods of non-review, and then we find ourselves in problems later on. This is sound advice, Mr. Minister. Mr. Speaker, it is very important, Mr. Speaker, for us to recognize that the review committee that is spoken about here, in terms of the composition of the review committee, I'm going back to that, the panel. It should be able to function, as I said before, as a strict appeal body without redress by the minister. I want to take note of that because I'm speaking slowly for you to write what I'm saying. This is a very serious matter. We were talking about our children who are being abused. Further, I want to emphasize, Mr. Speaker, that the decisions of this appeal body should then be reverted to the adoption board, or adoption committee, I should properly say, in order for adjudication against its final review. But I want to emphasize, Mr. Speaker, that the appeals to the minister do exist. And it is very clearly written, Mr. Speaker, that the review panel needs to be comprised of a lawyer and 2 public servants. I believe that given the situation, the seriousness of the situation, maybe the time has come, Mr. Attorney General, Mr. Minister, for us to consider non-public service members, not just a lawyer and public servants, but maybe you may wish to broaden it now to include not just public servants, but non-public servants.
Have you looked at the composition?
Yes. And so, Mr. Speaker, I believe that in such cases we can include former workers as well. People who work there? What do you mean? People in the ministry who have been in the department and ministry?
Public servants.
Former, not existing. Or there could be also psychologists can be included. Because just think about it. Why not a psychologist? In these critical times, why not a psychologist? Why only 2 public servants and a lawyer? Why? That is the question that we are asking. We could also include persons who are engaged in charity, NGOs. Lots of people out there are engaged in these kind of activities. And I am asking that we do this for transparency, one, and for proper accountability, and of course, inclusivity. And all of people approach as stakeholders.
Want to read 85C?
Sorry?
Want to read 85C?
Well, if you want me to read it, I will, because maybe we're talking about two different things. 85C, the Adoption Committee,
85C.
talking about review.
Read that.
Yeah, but we know that. I'm talking about the review, not the Adoption Committee, the review.
You said don't read it.
Huh? Of course, that's what we're talking about. Not the original Adoption Committee. The review panel is what I made mention of, which speaks only to a lawyer and to public servants. I am saying that we can be more broad in our thinking. That is all I'm saying. And why not? Again, this I think, having these appeals to the minister,
That is what.
and then having, as I mentioned before, the panel being of a permanent nature, I think we would be good to go. In fact, we must never exclude the partnership that we are seeking to develop with the members of the department. Their experience, day-to-day, long-term, professional, that's critically important. And so we must always try our best to include, to foster that partnership with the members of the department who can also help in investigating the actions that need to be investigated. Mr. Speaker, it is time really for us to do what we are doing. COVID-19 has exposed us to some of the most atrocious acts and abuse against our children. It is not only workers who are being abused, children in our homes are being abused. I listened very clearly to the passion of the member for Nevis 10. He was almost crying to say to us, there's an urgency to this matter because COVID-19 has exacerbated the problem as we know it. I think it is timely for us to be discussing this today in this parliament. It is unfortunate that it is being rushed. Dr. Clark said we should have had more time, and I support that view. Having this piece of legislation, so critically important, rushed in 3 readings in 1 sitting, does not speak well for us. But I understand that the member for number 8, for whatever reason, has chosen this particular path to follow today. We are here to lend our support.
Thank you.
We are here to point out areas which are unclear and which need to have clarification and clarity here in this parliament. I rest my case, Mr. Speaker. May it please you.
Thank you, Right Honourable Dr. Denzel Douglas, member for St. Christopher 7. Before I recognize the other presenter, I would wish to speak briefly to your initial part of your presentation where you sought to give clarification to the intentions of your colleague senator with respect to the time frame in which the notices was given. I accept your clarification. I understand exactly what you have said. That was her intention. But just to place on record, because we need to be very clear on these matters, that my objection, my intervention to when she was presenting, had to do, one, with respect to her questioning the decision of the chair to disallow a question to be asked. That is a completely separate matter. A decision was made that the question would not be allowed, and I gave reasons for not allowing the question. So that's one matter. The second matter of the notice, time of notice, and the order paper being circulated, in her presentation, I got the impression that she was suggesting that the office of the clerk had not circulated the notice and the order paper in time, which is completely different to her argument that Parliament is rushing the matter now. Those are two separate things. I am convinced that the notice was given in time and the order paper was circulated in time. But of course, it is your right to suggest and argue that it's not enough time for a bill of this nature. So I trust that my explanation is clear and we can see the difference in what I had indicated earlier and what the senator was attempting to put forward in her presentation. Next presenter, please. I recognize the Honourable Attorney General Vincent Byron Jr.
Mr. Chairman, Mr. Speaker, I had indicated to my honourable friend, of course, in number 6, that I would not speak. But he has referenced me on a number of occasions in his answer and asked me to look at the nature of his recommendations that he has been putting forward to this honourable House. And I just wanted to acknowledge his view that I should look at these and to respond to one or two things that he has said. Mr. Speaker, this is a very simple bill that is before this Parliament. It is a simple amendment that had no intention of reviewing any major substance of the bill, of the act. And if it needs be, we will come back to this House to do so. It's important to note there are just two things that this simple bill is asking to do. One, that instead of having the Director of Social Services be in a position to be on an adoption committee, that it now becomes the Director of Probation and Child Protection Services. That's all. One. There was before Director of Social Services, and we have come to amend it, to change it to Director of Probation and Child Protection Services. That's one. The second thing is to suggest that instead of having the Director of whatever it is, who is to preside over an adoption committee, that there be a deputy Chair.
The bill does not say that the deputy must preside.
I'm
The
saying,
bill says that
I'm just saying what the bill says. The members of the doctoral committee shall elect a deputy chairperson.
yeah.
So it is saying there is currently no deputy chairperson. And so we have come to say here that while you have a chairperson, we now ask the bill to provide for a deputy chairperson.
Of course.
That's all the bill is. That is what this bill is, Mr. Chair, Mr. Speaker. And it is very helpful that we have evoked a debate on a number of other issues, vaccination and all those things that has to do with a deputy being appointed or director of social services being the director of child probation and protection services. I, Mr. Speaker, would like to do approach it a little differently. This bill, this act, was passed in the year 2013. It was considered, examined by the previous administration, leading into 2013, the conceiving of the bill. All of these committees were conceived under the administration of the member for number 6. It's his bill. All the committee, how it should be, who should report to who, and who's sitting on the same chair. It was their bill, their act. It was part of our omnibus bill in the OECS. Different countries in the sub-region had this draft bill presented to us. And you can go and you can amend and modify it as you see fit. But the bill that was introduced into this Honourable House in 2013 and passed, under his watch, is what set up the current bill. No amendment has been made to it. All the warts of people having conflict and separation, he conceived it.
No.
It was passed in 2013.
The director is different.
It was passed in 2013.
Different director.
Everything in this bill was conceived and put to this Honourable House under his watch.
Different
And
director.
suddenly the bill ain't no good.
I said
We have not done anything. We're coming.
No. Nobody said the bill is no good. I don't have to go in front of order for that, because nobody said that.
Thank you.
You're wrong.
Thank you. Let me explain what this bill is, Mr. Speaker. There are two parts to it. The bill fundamentally is about for the care and protection of children. And the fundamental issue in it is what in the best interest of our children. And children can have problems. Some of the children at home are difficult to control. And mothers don't know how to go with the children. Parents can't go with the children. And social services come and they complain, and you can get a court or otherwise to have them go to a home, the New Horizons, where they can be taken out of that environment and there is care and protection under a public body. To do so, there is a board made up of someone who used to work in the government but is now a private citizen and has dedicated his life, along with the public servants, to the management socially of these kids. And I could go into what the Act says about care and protection of those children. The parents could ill-treat the children, and a teacher at school, or somebody in the health center, a doctor, could identify bruises and ill treatment of the children and make a report. And so, social services, the protection sections, can then move in and have an order of the court to take the children out of that environment to look after them. That is a significant part of this act. But the act also provides that children can be adopted. And it's not just the adoption, Mr. Speaker, of children who may be difficult, who may be ill-treated, but there may be situations where a family has a child and maybe an aunt or somebody else comes and says they'd like to have a child and they look after them, fostering them. An adoption can happen that way, by consent. There's agreement. So it's not just about ill treatment, abuse, but where there can be a consensual arrangement where adoptions can happen. It happens in a number of cases internationally. You may have a sister who migrated to the United States and doing well, ain't got no children. You want your child to get a chance, and that is one way it happens. Consensual arrangement. So it's not just a case of abuse and ill treatment. So the bill allows for that framework as well. It speaks about consent, how it works. But there are other questions about adoption. And even in that situation, there could well be a potential for abuse of the process. And that is why part of the discussion about who chairs an adoption committee and something becomes important. Because there is a chance where things could go awry. And we need to be very careful that we do not put children in a position where they can be abused. And so, Mr. Speaker, what this discussion and debate was, I'm not talking about questions about vaccination and so on, those type of hey thing that have no bearing on what we're doing. But the question is, do we have a process by which there is a legislative framework for a child to be adopted? That is the debate that evolved. But like I said, it really is about just changing the name to allow it to happen. A process that was thought out, debated in the halls of the previous administration and found to be okay. Brought to Parliament and passed. Today we hear all of the other questions being raised. And there could be valid questions. I'm not going to say no. I'm saying that's what I'm saying. But the way that you come, careful. What we are doing here today is doing a very straightforward thing. Change the name of Director of Social Services to Director of Child Protection and Probation, or whatever it is. One, and to provide for a deputy chairperson of the committee. That's it. There could be a need for us to have this reviewed when we go forward. But is there really any major difference in 2013 and 2021 as the basis of how our adoption committees work? Because the idea here is The idea here is that when the committee works, there is an appeal. There's been a back and forth about Section 85, but in 104, I think it is, or 105, that speaks to a review panel. And who sits on the review panel? An attorney at law. 7 years called to the bar. Not just out of law school. Chairs that committee. And has 2 technical people, I take it, public servants, who work with them to make recommendations, to review what has been before them and make recommendations. Mark you, in that same section there, the questions about consent and how you consent. Children over 12 years have to agree and all those type of things. It is a comprehensive review. And I just wanted, Mr. Speaker, to bring those 2 points, couple points to it, because I think we have to be careful that we give a proper view to this Parliament and those who are listening. Let's be clear. We have to have the best interest of the child. And I think is Honourable Senator Phipps who says, what does that really mean? And we have to see it in this positive light. We have to be careful that our children are seen to have their interests protected. There are some people, not a lot, but a few people, one is too many, who have tried to adopt children. And in most of these cases, if not all of them, they have tended to be consensual. They know nothing about the getting beat up. The parties agree. But the adoption committee, the board tried to do it, but the adoption committee was not properly in place because of this problem, Director of Social Services and Director of Private thing. And all he's doing is putting it in place properly for allow those to go through, for the court to grant an order for it to happen, for it to be properly constituted. And that's where we are today, Mr. Speaker. And I don't want there to be an idea that this is some sort of impasse, some sort of problem in our country. This has been around for years. It came to this Parliament in 2013, conceived and developed in its present and current form then. And all we are trying to do is improve on it. There might be other things we have to do, make it more, to make it even better and improve on it. And we welcome those. I wanted to say more, Mr. Speaker, about how we review legislation. Because if we come with minor amendments to help us to move forward and we have to go and rehash the entire bill, we could do this every day. We have established a law commission passed some years ago. Its major function had been to look at law revision. And by law revision, it meant that the existing laws would be updated from time to time to make them current. So for instance, there was a revision in 1961, and a number of amendments will be passed in between there. We did not have another revision until 2002. So a lot of laws will change over time, and we have to make them current. There was a revision again in 2009. We have now had one in 2017, and we have done some other revisions. And we now have an agreement. Every 2 years there will be a law revision. But I raise the point to say that the Law Commission has a second function, which we will move to make active, and that is, it's a law reform commission as well, where we need from time to time to revisit laws that are on the books that may need reviewing, updating, making more current, to go back and look at them if we feel that they don't capture what we need to make our community function properly. The law commissioner is Mrs. Josephine Malulu Webb, former senior magistrate, and she has done significant work helping us to continue the work as law revision commissioner that Mr. Macassar had done for many years. But we need to look at how we can look at our laws, and where they need reform, we revisit it and do so. Whether it's going to the Magistrates' Code of Procedure that needs to be updated, whether be issues of succession. I give the example very often of where our laws, many of our laws are based on the law in England, and where we have something like the law that involves the administration of estates. Our law is based on the English law in 1925. And if a man and woman are married and one of the spouses pass away, they may have children. The surviving spouse, according to our law, is entitled to 10% of what the man leaves behind. Absolutely. She would have half of the balance, 45%, would be hers with a life interest. She can't dispose of it. She could live in the house, and so forth. She can't go bank or anything like that. The other half, 45%, belong to the children. That has been the law since 1925. And many people often think, I married a woman and one of a certain half belonged to me. But that's not what the law says. In England, where we look to our law if we don't keep up, there have been many revisions, many reforms of their law, that today, whereas we said 10% here, there the spouse gets something like 80%. This is an example where we need to rethink and revisit laws that may be outdated, where there is a process of consultation with the community, institutions, whatever the laws are, commercial companies laws, whatever it is, that we do have a process of reviewing them from time to time. So we welcome when you raise questions of this nature, but we hope we do so in a reasonable fashion in keeping with the objects we want to do. Mr. Speaker, simple bill. We're changing the name of Director of Social Services to Director of Child Probation and Protection Services. And we're asking that of the members of the committee, one of them be appointed Deputy Chairperson. That's all. And with those few words, Mr. Speaker, I wish this bill safe passage. May it please you.
Mr. Speaker, Thank you, Honourable Attorney General. Honourable
I don't know if any other colleagues on this side want to make a presentation.
Well, they lost the chance because you.
Say this again?
The bill and you already want to go. Wrapping up.
Well, everybody said they want to go. They mean I should not. They mean I should not say. I should not say anything else because I should not say anything else because the Attorney General has done a great job in responding to the questions on the other side. You see, Mr. Speaker, when I got up this morning to speak, to present this bill, I thought of making it complicated. I thought of it. And I said, you know what, let me keep it simple. Just as simple as the Attorney General framed it. And by keeping it simple, it has evoked so much chatter on the opposition benches. I wished I had made it complicated. I really wished I had made it complicated. Mr. Speaker, have you ever read The Lay of the Last Minstrel? It's a poem by Sir Walter Scott. You must read it. I will suggest you read it, Mr. Speaker. You want me to say it?
No, please do it.
Oh. Okay. Breathe there, man. I won't say it. You see, Mr. Speaker, it was such a simple bill, calling for 2 amendments. Two important amendments to facilitate and to help child protection, because adoption, which was being discussed this morning, some of them have been frustrated by the legislation from 2013, and the persons seeking adoption who were supposed to be adopted aged out of adoption while this bill stood so. And that's what we're trying to correct, because they were there so long that they aged out. That's why we're here, to make sure that we did that. But Mr. Speaker, if I may, I heard a story one time, and I will share it with you. A lady had twin sons. And they were so opposite in the way they behaved. One was a real pessimist, and the other was an optimist. And the lady was worried that as they became teenagers, the way they were behaving would be a problem. So she went to a psychiatrist, reported that these 2 children, one so optimistic, the other so pessimistic. The psychiatrist said, I'll solve that problem for you. I'll come to the home and I will deal with this matter for you. So he went to the home. And he said, you know what? They sleep in different rooms? Yes. Well, I'm going to put in one room a lot of expensive toys. And we'll let the pessimist go in that room. I'm going to put in the other room horse refuse, dung. And I'm going to let the optimists go in that room. And they gave them a few minutes each in the room. The pessimist with those wonderful toys, and the optimist with that horse refuse. A few minutes after, they went and opened the door of the room with the pessimist. And he was crying his eyes out. Why are you crying, they asked. He said, because I know that all these toys don't belong to me, you all can take them away. That's what they're crying about, They keep crying. The bill come too late, to not enough time. That's what we hear from these people. But the optimists, on the other hand, Mr. Speaker, the optimists, when they went into his room, the fellow was trying dung all over the place. What are you doing there? Asked him. He said there got to be a pony somewhere in here. He's optimist looking for a pony. He didn't sit it down. He's thinking about the pony. Because he's an optimist.
Pony?
Yes. So he could get up. Yes. So when I hear the opposition crying about the bill and the time and all kind of things, that story popped in my head. Why people so pessimistic, so frightened, so worried, so afraid of...
Because we care about...
I know, Mr. Speaker, that we come to this parliament and the Prime Minister presents a budget speech on Monday, and by Tuesday morning, the opposition had to speak for the same, is offered the same amount of time. Don't you, opposition leader, have that response in 24 hours? Stop crying. Stop crying. You get a bill, you pick it up, you read it, you see how it applies, and you come and debate it. That's what you do.
That's what we do.
And so, Mr. Speaker, the opposition leader stood up to try to defend what the Honourable Senator on his left, Dr. Clark, was trying to explain and didn't properly explain. I thought you were a lawyer because you were doing trying to do a defense job. But at the same time, you're crying about lawyers who don't want to go to court to defend people. And you're doing such a great job as a lawyer trying to defend Dr. Clark. Mr. Speaker, this is an important bill. And that is why you see, Mr. Speaker, I'm glad I played sports, cricket and football. Because nobody will do me so and hook me off and go on the next way. And that's what the Honourable Leader of the Opposition is trying to do. Do so I go down another road. I'm not going down that road with you. You can't hook me off at all. You're not going to be able to bowl a googly and I ain't see it. Not me. I can see the googly. That's the importance of playing sports. Sports give you this culture, to see when somebody wants to throw googly at you. I won't be bowled by that googly. We have come here to make two important changes to the Children Care and Adoption Bill so that we could respond to the needs of the children, so that we could make sure that they're properly adopted, so that they cannot stay frustrated in a system and then age out. That's what we're here for. And so there are a lot of chatter, Mr. Speaker, a lot of chatter which ensued today. I will spend some time on it, but not a lot of time, because we really don't want to be distracted. Let me just say, in response to a couple of things. When I spoke this morning, or earlier today, if not this morning, I indicated that there were three things I mentioned, and I went on to say affecting why the committee was not in place, and I said the other two are not for this house. I did say that very clearly. So to raise an issue about regs and other things are not for this house. That is what it was. I made that quite clear. I made sure I said it quite clearly. Yet, people sitting here, conveniently or deliberately, behave as if it was not said. So, Mr. Speaker, the talk would suggest as if there had never been a review committee before. There have always been review committees. People know that lawyers have been engaged in it. I know that Agatha James, for example, served on the review committee. I also know that Eshe Hendrickson served on the review committee. I know that Dr. Sharon Archibald is the current chair of the review committee. But if you listen to what was said in the opposition benches, you would think a review committee had never been formed before. There is a review committee that has operated. And they will make it look as if we did not speak about what the role of the review committee is. Sorry, the role of the adoption committee is. In my second or third statement this morning, I pointed out that the committee is to determine the manner in which a child is selected for adoption, establish guidelines for the conduct of negotiations entered into by the adoption committee with a parent who wishes to have the child selected at the adoption committee to be placed for adoption, receive applications for adoption, assess the suitability of persons adopting a child, establish and maintain an adoption list, make arrangements for and in relation to placement of the child. I went through it in detail.
They weren't listening.
It should not have been a surprise to anyone as to why there will be an adoption committee. And so a lot of song and dance has been made.
Mr. Speaker, on a point of order, just for clarification.
Yes.
To confirm the approach, for the Minister, to confirm the approach in which the adoption committee reports on the substantive duties.
Sure, of course. Thanks. I'm coming to all of that. I want to take you back, Mr. Speaker, to Part 10. Part 10 of the Act. The Principal Act. A person who is involved in the making of a decision with respect to the adoption of a child shall have regard as far as practicable or appropriate to the following principles. The best interest of the child, both in childhood and later in life, shall be the paramount considerations. If you listen to the opposition today, you would think that people arbitrarily just deal with children and put them in places where they may not be happy or where they will be taken advantage of. The adoption is to be regarded as a service for the child, not for persons wishing to acquire the care of a child. The adoption is for a person. The adoption, it has to do with a person does not have the right to. Anybody don't have the right to adopt a child. If the child is able to form his or her own views on a matter concerning his or her adoption, he or she shall be given an opportunity to express those views freely. And those views are given due weight in accordance with the age, maturity, development, capacity of the child and the circumstances of the child.
Section 855.
If you, I'm coming to that because I think you totally misread it this morning.
No, just clarify, that's all.
We have to look at the likely effect on the child throughout his or her life. Any harm which the child has suffered or is at risk of suffering, the likely prejudicial effect in the delay in arriving at a decision relating to the child. And listen now, it is not even the committee alone, because here in section 2, in determining the best interest of the child, consideration shall be given by the court to the following. And there are a list of things here which the court has to take into consideration. This is not any power in any director to make a decision arbitrarily, adversely affecting the child. There's more to it than that. The court eventually come down to 84. In order to ensure that the child is able to participate in a decision made under this act that has a significant impact on his or her life, every person who participates in the process of adoption shall ensure that the child is provided with the following: adequate information, the opportunity to express his or her views freely according to his abilities, information about the outcome of a decision, any assistance that is necessary for the child to understand that information and express this is where a child can understand, appropriate counseling. Let me repeat the one because it comes as if we missed it, you see. Counseling! Counseling! Leader of the opposition. A psychologist and a psychologist. Counseling!
Something wrong with you.
I agree with you. I'm reading what is right, and you have been expressing that faint you want to faint the whole country so people can get hooked up. We come down to the adoption committee. The members of the adoption committee shall be appointed by the board. Let me ask you something, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, if you're the head of a cabinet and you have ministers of government that you've given portfolios, they're accountable to you or not? Or they're accountable to the cabinet, aren't they? Yes, they're accountable to the cabinet. Because you're a minister of finance don't mean you can go and spend off all the country money like that. You're accountable to somebody or organization. There is somebody is accountable. And it is because of that accountability why someone was labeled with bankrupt in the country. Because of that accountability. That's what accountability is. There's an organization and a organogram which tells you who in charge, who at the head. Even the Prime Minister himself, now he reported to a cabinet. Well, I hope he knew that. You're accountable. So, when the committee is formed, on which there are 2 representatives from non-governmental organizations, whose mandate reflects the care and protection of children, 2 NGOs. In section 4 it says, a person shall not be appointed by the board as a member of the adoption committee based on his or her expertise. A person shall be appointed based on his expertise, experience, leadership in the fields of child care and protection adoption. And at 5 it says, the adoption committee, the committee headed by the Director of Probation and Child Care Services. That committee, it says, shall be ultimately accountable to the board. Who is the committee accountable to? The board. He's not accountable to himself or herself. Accountable to the board.
Section
85.5.
Mr. Speaker.
The adoption committee shall be ultimately accountable
Point of
to
order
the board.
For clarification. So, Honourable Member, can you kindly hear, which you promised you would do, confirm that once the adoption committee is accountable to the board, that it means this is their direct report, that they're reporting to the board, and just to confirm also that section 85.2, which you just pointed out, speaks to the fact that that same adoption committee may have members of the board, so you're saying that they are accountable to themselves. So that's just the clarification that's needed to make sure that it's a direct report to the board.
If I'm to answer the question, I will have to ask you if you think everybody is not, if people are not independent in the way they think. Because if one member of the board is on the committee and comes to a 7-member board, you mean one member can tell the rest of the board, this is what we want and it's going to happen that way?
No, remember, it's-
There's a board to which they report, and because it's a member of the board and on the committee, that does not mean that the board have to agree with the committee. Not at all.
but remember, the director reports to the board separately, and he also reports as the chair of the adoption committee. He has dual reporting to the same
You
board.
picked up an argument this morning, you still pursue it, and you're wrong,
No, you told
and you
me
don't
that you would
understand.
explain
What I'm saying again, there is an adoption committee that is appointed by the board. They are accountable to the board. And the rest of it will come in the other sections as I come, you'll see how it works. And you know that there will be regulations governing the conduct of everything in this act. Regulations. You can't expect everything to be in the law. The regulations follow and determine how things are done.
But even if the regulation are to use common sense, everything in the regulations.
The law doesn't make room for common sense, and the responsibility is to explain for the people, not least for me.
Common sense there.
No.
There's a reason why there are regulations, you know.
Organization.
There's a reason why there are regulations. I'm not going to go into the terms of appointment, the terms of appointment of the board and the committee. Conduct of meetings. The adoption committee shall meet at such time and the place of the board shall decide. The director shall preside at all meetings and so on. I'm not going to go into all of that. The secretary, office of the adoption committee, oath of secrecy that you have to take. Functions of the adoption committee. I should spend a bit of time on that. The functions of the adoption committee: to determine the manner in which a child is selected for adoption, to establish guidelines for the conduct of negotiations and so on, to receive applications made in pursuant of that. I think I read those again this morning. I'm going over them, but I did that this morning. For the purpose of carrying out its function, the adoption committee may conduct such inquiries and carry out such investigation with respect to any matter. Establish procedures to conduct interviews, solicit, accept and review reports from individuals or organizations concerned or involved in the adoption of children. And it goes on at 92 and 93 of who could apply. Applications to be assessed for placement. Decision of the adoption committee. I mean, all of that is there, and I don't understand why we just stuck to 85 this morning instead of reading the entire bill to try to respond to it. And let me see if I can just look at 95. Decisions by the adoption committee. We have in regard to the home study assessment conducted under subsection 2 of section 94, the adoption committee decides that an applicant, A, is suitable and capable of having a child placed in his home. The applicant, for the purposes of adoption, the adoption committee shall approve the application and within 2 weeks after making its decision, issue a notice of approval to the applicant in the prescribed form and shall enter the name of the applicant in the adoption list. Or B, if not suitable or capable of having children placed in the home of the applicant, for the purpose of the adoption committee shall within 2 weeks after making decision issue a notice of refusal. The adoption committee shall not grant approval for an applicant who is a single person to have a child placed in the home of that applicant for the purposes of adoption unless the adoption committee is satisfied having conducted the home study assessment pursuant to subsection 2 of section 94, that there are exceptional circumstances. And then you come to 96. An applicant who is aggrieved You said the director can have power, so much power. An applicant who is aggrieved by a decision of the adoption committee made pursuant to section 95 may, not later than 2 weeks after the date of receipt of the written notice of the decision of the adoption committee, make an application to the minister. That was what was troubling to the member this morning, because the application goes to the minister. Well, let's look at it. You apply for something in an adoption committee run by a minister. You're going to make an application to appeal the decision to the adoption committee's friend? You're going to go and appeal to who? The minister. Because the minister recognizes that the adoption committee reports to the board. You're going to go and report to the board or make an application, an appeal to the board. The minister, and then the minister ensures that there's a review panel appointed under Section 97 shall conduct an inquiry to assess the suitability of the applicant to have a child placed in the home. On completion of the inquiry, make recommendations to the minister whether or not the decision of the adoption committee should be varied. And then, of course, the minister then determines that the adoption committee has a review decision. The adoption committee shall, as soon as practicable, after receiving the recommendations of the review panel, because there's a review panel that review. When you appeal to the minister has to make sure that there's a review, even if none was done before, even if one was done before. A review is done. And that review may even require the adoption committee to go back and review its own decision. The review panel does something they think is different to what the adoption committee said, and it comes to the minister, they have to review the decision based on what is decided. And that is what the role is. There's no power in the director there's no power there for him to do anything on his own. Too much power? Minister, member for number 1, there's not too much power. Because there are checks and balances. The review committee is there. It goes back for variation. All that is there in the act. As a matter of fact, I'm not even sure where I'm going to this one, because this act was passed by your government, you know. The leader of the opposition knows that he was here when this act was passed. It is his act. Why am I at pains to explain your own act?
You are afraid, you're really afraid.
Because you don't seem to understand the act you passed. That's my challenge. You do not seem to understand the act that you passed.
That's why you are afraid.
Trying to defend Dr. Clark, you see, Senator Clark, because she talked about the decisions, because she talked about the director, and whether is not, and my friend in number 1, if he didn't have too much power.
Conflict of interest. Well, I didn't mention power.
Mr. Speaker, that discussion took us into a realm where we should not have gone, you know. Because how many persons at home are hurting because of COVID? All of that. It went into this morning. When the member knows that it was only last year that $23.5 million was paid out to people who were hurting in this country, and also knows that right now we're on the verge of paying out another $15 million. They know that. So yes, we know that people are having a challenge, and yes, we're responding to the challenges. That's what we're doing. Well, I know, Mr. Speaker.
Mr. Speaker, on a point of order, if I could just ask the honourable member, there was just one thing, seems like he's wrapping up, to direct us to where it says the chairperson of the adoption committee reports directly to the board, because it says in section 7 that the working association does not explicitly state you report to the board, and that's the final thing that you have to clear up. That's the final thing. I looked in section 7.
Again, I refer you back to 85.5, which says they are accountable to the board. Accountability means they must report to the board. Even if it's not there in that language, the regulations will say what they have to do. And even if the regulations don't say, they're accountable to you, they're accountable to you. Are you going to be accountable and nobody reporting to you?
Do you think we need to make it elusively clear?
can you be accountable without anybody reporting to you? Tell me.
I think we're both.
You are accountable for a classroom of students that you're dealing with. You're going to have those students in your class doing as they like, and
Does it mean the students will report to me?
do your headmistress in your school or headmaster, is that you're accountable to them?
So
Accountability means you have to.
But
We don't understand accountability to me.
No, that's what I'm saying.
You don't understand what accountability is?
In the interest of the law, doesn't accountability can't be said?
Mr. Speaker, I'll say I played too much sports to get sidetracked by those, because the truth is, the bill provides, the original bill passed in 2013 under the previous administration, the original bill. All of what is asked to be clarified is not being changed. Two things changing. One, we're ensuring that the Director of Social Services, the interpretation of Director means Director of Probation and Child Care rather than Director of Social Services. That's one change. The other change is to make sure that somebody is a deputy. Two changes. I mean, I don't understand where all of the other talking coming from. Two things we're changing. And those two things are important to facilitate the progress to be made in adopting children, which has been stifled for the last 7-8 years because of a law passed by the previous administration. People have aged out of being adopted.
You have 6 years with the bill. What have you done?
And you're arguing we're doing something now?
We had 2 years. What have you done in 6 years? Since you want to make the better.
It's ultimately accountable.
Don't necessarily clap.
So who is that?
Focus.
Ultimately accountable. Well, there you go.
Ultimately accountable to the board.
Yes.
Of the business activities and other affairs of the adoption committee.
Ultimately, they didn't put in the ultimately, I mean. Ultimately accountable. You know, it's just a rule, see? And I don't, they're trying to get you distracted. Here we are, let's focus because we have so many things to do today. This bill has, the act itself has in it, Director means Director of Social Services. Director of Social Services has no role to do with child care, adoption and protection. Who has that responsibility is the Director of Probation and Child Care Protection. That person has the responsibility. So if it ends up before a tribunal like the court, a social services director who knows nothing about it can't respond in the way they ought. So the person who knows is the one to be there. That is the change from social services to probation and child care. That's a problem?
No.
Thank you. Will you support the bill? Good. The other change is to make sure that there's a deputy, that there's someone to conduct meetings if the director can't conduct it. Anything wrong with that? No. So let's move on. Let's move on. The next time I come with a bill, I think I'll make it complicated. Because when it's easy, they don't understand it. They don't understand it. You worked at social services long before 2013, you know. So you don't even know what goes on up there. You pretend you know, but you don't know.
And now I know more than you.
So, Mr. Speaker, if I may just wind up, as I said, because we have some other important matters to do, and I think that this rules that the member for number 6 and others raised is to get us off track. As the Director of Social Services is not intimately involved, and I repeat that, not intimately involved in child care protection, the board has recommended that we make an amendment to make it Director of Probation and Child Care Protection Services. That makes sense. Even the opposition agrees. And so that is what we will do today by amending this bill. Mr. Speaker, there are a lot of other things that were said, but I guess that will take me down the street where they're trying to make, you know, I don't want to go down that road. And so I will say that we have heard from all of the speakers today. I'm really grateful to the unique perspective of Minister Wendy Phipps as she spoke, and also to my good friend from Nevis, my brother Evelyn, on his unique presentation this morning, earlier today. And I am also grateful that the opposition members did have a role, even as much as it was a ruse, but at least draw our attention to some things that the Attorney General seen that we can look at as years go by.
Mr. Speaker, on a point of order.
Sorry, Honourable Member.
It's just.
That's just an opinion.
I said, I think it is a ruse.
He did not say you think. He did
I
not
said, I
say he
think.
thinks.
Let me say it again. Which I think is a ruse.
But it's quite an unfortunate statement. Because we're here supporting the bill. We're supporting the bill.
I can't think.
I've been supporting the bill.
Honourable Senator, Honourable
I
Senator.
understand. I
Okay, thank you.
I receive.
Said something which I think was just a ruse. And so, to distract from the important conversation of us protecting our children. And, Mr. Speaker, with those words, I wish this bill safe passage. May it please.
Thank you, Member for St. Christopher 8, the Honourable Eugene Hamilton. The question is, we need to move the suspension of 57, don't we? I'm sorry. Yes, we'll have the second reading and we move it to committee.
That's correct.
I'm getting ahead of myself.
Yes.
The question is that the bill entitled Children Care and Adoption Amendment Bill 2021 be read a second time. Those in favour? Aye. Those against? The ayes have it.
Mr. Speaker.
A bill to amend the Children Care and Adoption Act, Cap 12.01, otherwise known as the Children Care and Adoption Amendment Bill 2021.
The bill has been read a second time. House moves into committee.
Clauses 1 to 3.
The question is that clauses 1, 2, and 3 stand part of the bill. Those in favour? Aye. Those against? The ayes have it.
Clause 4.
Mr. Chairman, it is proposed to amend the Children Care and Adoption Act as follows. By replacing Clause 4 as follows. Clause 4, amendment of Section 87. The Act is amended in Section 87 by replacing subsection 3 as follows. Subsection 3, the members of the Adoption Committee shall elect a deputy chairperson from amongst the members appointed pursuant to the provisions of subsections 85(3)(b) and 85(3)(c). And if the chairperson is unable to preside at a meeting, the deputy chairperson shall preside at that meeting.
The question is that clause 4, as amended, stands part of the bill. Those in favour? Aye. Those against? The ayes have it.
The enacting clause.
Question is that the enacting clause stands part of the bill. Those in favour? Aye. Those against? The ayes have it.
The title.
The question is that the title stands part of the bill. Those in favour? Aye. Those against? The ayes have it. House resumes.
The motion. There's a motion, right? Mr. Speaker, I believe that sections 57 of the rules be suspended to allow the bill to be read a third time and passed in the same sitting.
The question is that rule number 57 of the standing orders be suspended. Those in favour?
Aye.
Those against? The ayes have it. The rule is suspended to accommodate third reading now. A good question. The question is that the bill entitled the Children Care and Adoption Amendment Bill 2021 receives its third reading and pass. Those in favor? Aye. Those against? The ayes have it.
A bill to amend the Children Care and Adoption Act, Cap 12.01, otherwise known as the Children Care and Adoption Amendment Bill 2021.
The bill has been read a third time and passed. Next item on the order paper.
Motions, resolutions, motions.
There's a resolution.
Mr. Speaker.
I recognize the Honourable Member for number 8, Eugene Hamilton.
There's a 50th anniversary booklet. It speaks to the years of Reverend William M. Connor, 1949 to 1999. So there's a lot of information here which I'm directing persons to read. But, Mr. Speaker, the resolution today, which is a resolution of the National Assembly of St. Christopher and Nevis to celebrate the centennial anniversary of pioneer Reverend Dr. William M. Connor, OBE. And Mr. Speaker, for ease, I will just read the resolution because I want to make one amendment to the resolution as well. Whereas William Manasseh Connor, also known as Pastor Connor or Brother Connor, was born on the 21st day of June, on the first day of the summer in 1921 in Russell Village, West Basseterre. And on 11 November 1990, he made a triumphant homeward march and went to be with the Lord. And whereas at the tender age of 10, having lost his father, the great loss forced him to leave school and to secure employment in the cotton fields of Nevis estate. And whereas in 1943, his career with the church began with his employment as sexton of the St. George's Anglican Church in Basseterre, a post which he held for 19 years until he resigned in 1962. And whereas he seriously expanded his religion and social work in September 1949, with the initiation of various social programs, including the establishment of a Sunday school, which would grow from 13 children in attendance at the first session to include various branches being established in other parts of the island, such as Old Road, St. Peter's, and the famous Salem Sunday School, under the Cock and Hen Tree in James Street, Newtown. And whereas in 1949, he organized a Sunday School Savings Corps, which is still in operation today. And whereas in 1957, he began a typing school, armed with only one typewriter and one sole purpose, and that was to empower young ladies with training in various administrative skills. From these humble beginnings, the school grew and was highly operational until the advent of computers. In 1958, he then turned his attention to provide assistance for young men with the establishment of the Wycliffe Crusaders. Some may say Wycliffe. And whereas in 1964, he introduced the idea of church transportation in the Basseterre area rather than the Federation. Just strike the word Federation in the Basseterre area with the purchase of the first church van. In 1966, he also introduced the idea of Vacation Bible School in the island of St. Christopher. And whereas through his interventions, Sunday School would gain a solid footing, giving birth to the Baptist movement in the Federation. This led to the establishment of the Antioch Baptist Church, which is a recognized beacon in the community and the first established Baptist church in the Federation. Pastor Connor and 21 members painstakingly structured the foundation of the church on 5th March 1963. And whereas, following the formation of the Antioch Baptist Church, Pastor Connor established the Mount Carmel Baptist Church in Boreal, St. Kitts. in 1965. And the Calvary Baptist Church in St. Paul, now the Calvary Baptist Tabernacle in Romney Ground, Sandy Point, which first began as a Sunday school in 1965. Then it was organized into a mission in 1971, and then it was structured into a church in 1975 with Pastor Connor as its first pastor. And whereas he received several honors during his lifetime, including in 1979, Her Majesty Queen Elizabeth II appointed him an officer of the British Empire. In 1979, he was also awarded the Doctor of Divinity by the Caribbean Evangelical Association, Incorporated. In 1981, he was appointed an honorary deputy sheriff of the state of Texas, USA. In 1982, he was awarded Citizen of the Year by the Organization of Progressive Nationals of St. Kitts and St. Kitts, as thousands of people he applauded, as eminently and ethically qualified in the field of sociology. In 1983, before some 23,000 people, he was afforded the great honor of delivering the keynote address on that momentous occasion when St. Christopher Nevis gained her independence from England. In 1983, he was also commissioned to the Order of Kentucky Colonels of the state of Kentucky in the USA. In 1986, he was awarded the honorary citizenship of the city of Lincoln in the state of Illinois, USA. In 1988, he was appointed as Lieutenant Colonel Aide-de-Camp, Governor, staffed by His Excellency, the Governor of the state of Georgia in the USA. And whereas he was honored by the government of St. Christopher Nevis as having the new St. Johnson Village Primary School named in his honor as Dr. William Connor Primary School. And whereas every nation has its heroes, its visionaries, its champions, and Reverend Dr. William M. Connor should be categorized as one of the champions of the Federation of St. Kitts and Nevis. And whereas the National Assembly hereby wishes to join in the celebration of the centennial anniversary of Pioneer Reverend Dr. William M. Connor, OBE. Be it now resolved, therefore, that the National Assembly of St. Christopher and Nevis hereby joins in the celebration of the centennial anniversary of Pioneer Reverend Dr. William M. Connor, OBE. Mr. Speaker, this resolution speaks for itself, and I should not prolong it. We all know Dr. Connor, who served his country well as a pastor, as a teacher, and on this 100th centennial of his, it is my privilege as Minister responsible for ecclesiastical affairs to move this resolution and to seek the support of this Honourable House for honouring him at this time. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Mr. Speaker, with your leave, I rise to fully support this resolution before us as we honor the life of Reverend Dr. William M. Connor, OBE. Mr. Speaker, I rise not only as the proud parliamentary representative from St. Christopher III, where Dr. William Connor hails and where his life work is a beacon within the village community, but I also stand here as someone who have had many summers at the Antioch Baptist Church Vacation Bible School. As a matter of fact, if you grew up in the village, spent time in the village, especially in the summertime, there was no getting away from Vacation Bible School. Absolutely not. Every morning, you must be dressed and ready for Vacation Bible School at 9 a.m. And Mr. Speaker, I could recall my cousins and I at many occasions trying to wiggle ourselves out of having to go to Vacation Bible School. And we were always reminded that when our parents and our aunts and uncles were younger, it was as if they had no choice but to go to vacation Bible school or Sunday school. They could recall the days of Sunday school in particular when Pastor Connor and our brother Connor, as he was affectionately known, would come around the community with his PA system strapped on to the church vehicle, announcing to all mothers, make sure those children come to Sunday school. As a matter of fact, I can remember my grandmother saying doesn't matter where she was, she would hear, Miss Byron, make sure them boys come up there this afternoon. Or Miss Walters, make sure them boys find themselves in Sunday school this afternoon. And it was the same for Vacation Bible School. Brother Connor was a giant of a man. A giant in stature and a giant in personality. And so everyone from the village community saw him as a figure that they looked up to, someone who created an atmosphere within the village that brought people together. He looked out for the people of the community. He cared about the people of the community. And you would have heard him say or speak to the reason why he would have started the Sunday school, because, and he would describe it as a way for him to be able to serve the underprivileged, unwanted, despised, neglected, and downtrodden children of the village. It was his passion, Mr. Speaker. That passion that still lives on today at the Antioch Baptist Church. That passion that still lives on today at the Mount Carmel Baptist Church. That passion that still lives on today at the Calvary Baptist Church. He started a mission, a ministry, at a time when it was not heard of. You don't start a new church. Nobody's supposed to do that. We already have our established churches. Just join one, and he was part of one in the Anglican Church. As we would have heard, he served for 19 years as a sexton at the Anglican Church. But he felt that there was so much more that he could give. There was so much more that could be said about the gospel, and there was a stronger way in which he would be able to deliver the message and the gospel. And having learned about the Baptist ministry, having seen it for himself, having attended a Baptist church when he traveled overseas, he decided that was it. Baptist. That is what he wanted to be associated with, and he believed strongly that the Baptist church was what was needed in St. Kitts and Nevis. And so, from there, he came back and he started the Baptist church along with the other members of the Wycliffe Crusaders. And so, his legacy continues today, Mr. Speaker. Started with a Sunday school of some 13 children, known then as the St. Johnson Sunday School. It grew to be so much more. Starting with only 13 children, but then somehow it expanded to 6 classes, known as the beginners, the primary, the juniors, the intermediates, the seniors, and adults. So whereas it was just children at one point, he made sure he covered everyone across the spectrum, just so that he would be able to spread and teach the Word of God. Mr. Speaker, he was committed, and he did not care about the detractors and the many voices and naysayers who told him he couldn't, you can't, you shouldn't. even when met with adversity trying to start this new Baptist ministry, he would always comment and say, I will do my duty as I see it and leave the rest to God. And I believe that that is something that all of us could learn from. Do my duty as I see it and leave the rest to God. Mr. Speaker, that as I said before, there is so much that we can learn from this giant of a man, and so much he has offered, a legacy that carries from generation to generation. He was fearless in his pursuit of spreading the word. He moved as God would have led him, starting the Sunday school, Wycliffe Crusaders, the Baptist movement, Antioch Baptist Church, Mount Carmel Baptist Church, Calvary Baptist Churches, the bus ministry, Vacation Bible School, and there's so much more we can speak about of what he's done and how he have impacted the lives of persons, not only in the village community, but far and wide. I mean, look at Antioch Baptist Church today. What started as a village church is now, in my opinion, a federation's church. Look at it today. His legacy continues. And so it is more than fitting for us to stand here on what would have been his 100th birthday to honor this giant of a man, to honor his legacy. May it please you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, Honourable Member for St. Christopher 3, Akira Byron Nisbet. Recognize the Honourable Member for St. Christopher 1. Dr.
Thank you very much, Honourable Speaker. I too lend our full support to this resolution. Although much would have been said about Pastor Connor, I think it is fitting that I bring brief remarks as well. Knowing in my view, looking at him, he is a hero. I had the opportunity of attending his Sunday school under the coconut tree with Miss Jeffers and the others in those times growing up. Anybody who having Sunday school, we had to attend just about all of them. So sometimes a Sunday, you end up in 3 or 4 Sunday schools. I'm extremely grateful for that foundation. I liked that Sunday school because on a number of occasions, you always got something to eat after. And this is a ministry that Pastor Connor had, and the Antioch Baptist, and I believe the Baptist movement, still continue to where once you are in need, you can go to that church and you can be guaranteed of something to eat, if not food packages already put together, a little change that you can buy your groceries. And this is indeed a ministry called of God. The Vacation Bible Schools, as the Honourable Member spoke about, they were the leading vacation Bible schools, a school at the time in St. Kitts. And each year you'll see a contingent of persons from the various Baptist churches overseas coming to St. Kitts and investing, checking your eyes, giving persons who are in need of glasses the opportunity to get a pair of glasses. And the list go on, assisting with construction of homes, whatever they had to do while they're on their mission. And I just want to congratulate the Antioch Baptists and the Baptist family on a whole on this special occasion as they celebrate the hero, as I would dub it at this time. May I please you, Mr. Speaker?
Mr. Speaker, may I rise to lend my voice in support of the resolution. Clearly, it has been brought here by the government, which is indicative of the strong support which the government has for the long meritorious work of Brother Pastor Connor, a genuine patriot who rose from humble beginnings to inspire and to lead persons to higher heights, and in a real sense has been able to transform not only the village community, but to transform the country of St. Kitts and Nevis through his hard work and devotion to doing the Lord's work. The member for St. Christopher III spoke of the legacy in terms of the number of churches which across the length and breadth of St. Kitts, including the Mount Carmel, which is often described as the constituency number 7 church. Mount Carmel itself had done its own Sunday school program, a tabernacle, next or opposite the Jeffreys residence. And I'm sure our beautiful clerk who is here would have some recollection of those days when Sunday school was there. And indeed, a number of persons from Tabernacle would move on to become leaders in the church at Mount Carmel in Burial. So his work has touched thousands of persons across the country. His humility, his strength, his persona are all things which persons refer to as they speak to his legacy. I want to say that we are all proud of that work, proud of that kind of leadership. And in fact, he has ensured the continuity of his church by the way in which he had organized it. He has left, and we now have Pastor Lincoln leading the church with as much zest and commitment to ensure that the church continues to impact and that he follows as much as he can the example of Pastor Connor before him. I want to commend the church because the church under Lincoln Connor had put on a number of commemorative activities to highlight his outstanding contribution as they mark the 100th anniversary. So I would want Pastor Connor to know that we carry love and support for the elderly, now deceased Connor, and the government and people of St. Kitts and Nevis are deeply appreciative of his long and meritorious contribution to the country, not only in the spiritual realm, but clearly, as you have heard from some of the presentation, or at least from the member for number 3, he was a person who attempted to satisfy and service as many of the felt needs of the people, a pioneer in his own right, and an outstanding citizen of St. Kitts and Nevis. We pay honor to him, and we hope that he is in glory land. I want also, Mr. Speaker, in closing, to say the significance of this particular resolution is great for the church, and to recognize that we have several members of that congregation here in church today, and to commend them for coming to show solidarity with the government of St. Kitts and Nevis in attempting to honor and to pay tribute and to preserve for posterity in the annals of our Parliament the long and deserving contribution which Pastor Connor would have made to nation building.
Mr. Speaker, I too rise because it would be quite remiss of me if I did not use this opportunity to express my profound gratitude for my own personal development, recalling that Brother Connor did come to my village of St. Paul's when I was but a boy. He came with people like Brother Penny, Brother now Pastor Mills, and of course Pastor Dr. Calvin Hazel. And it is from there the Calvary Baptist Church was established as was outlined in the resolution. I want to use this opportunity, of course, to indicate that he made a solid social and Christian and spiritual contribution in the development of the village of St. Paul's and Newton Ground, because membership was drawn from these two communities in particular. I salute all the pastors of that church today, especially Pastor Dr. Lincoln Connor and all the other associate pastors and members who have stood with this church in its quest to bring spiritual guidance and teach Christian principles to the people of St. Kitts and Nevis. May it please you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you very much, honourable members. The question is that the resolution as presented by the Honourable Eugene Hamilton in this National Assembly be approved. Those in favour? Those against? The resolution honouring the celebration of the centennial anniversary of pioneer Reverend Dr. William M. Connor, OBE, has been approved by this National Assembly. Next.
Adjournment.
Mr. Speaker, I do rise, as is customary, at the end of our sittings, to move that this House be adjourned sine die. And in doing so, Mr. Speaker, I want to make two comments, or to acknowledge some important events and also happenings in part of my ministry. For example, Mr. Speaker, I want to ask for the leave to wish the relatives, the family of Ms. Nellie Mills of Sandy Point, and the management and staff of the Social Security on the sudden passing of the long-standing, dedicated employee and family and friend. As the Minister, I am advised that Social Security has had experiences of losing a few people quite suddenly. For example, I'm aware that there was Miss Verna Hanley, who was at the time the administrative assistant in the office of the director, who was passed suddenly. I also know of Miss Madeleine Isles, who is, I think she was from Nevis. She was at the branch office in Nevis. I know Mr. Shane Scott, Mr. Oral Colburn. There are quite a few who had sudden passing, and this was one of them. Within a very short time, she left us, and so my condolences are with the family and also with the staff of the Social Security. Mr. Speaker, I also want to take the opportunity I can't recall being in a parliament so close to the date of what I will describe as perhaps a day that will live in infamy in the Federation of St. Kitts and Nevis. I want to draw your attention, Mr. Speaker, and those of this House, and of course people of the Federation of St. Kitts and Nevis, to the day, the 1st of August. On that day, 50 years ago, Mr. Speaker, it was reported, and I'm not sure if it has been challenged, that some 321 persons left Basseterre 51 years ago, thank you, 51 years ago, thank you for that correction. 51 years ago left Basseterre on the roadstead on the MV Christina on what was supposed to be a short journey to Nevis. It had become, Mr. Speaker, the norm to go excursions in Nevis on these holiday weekends, but it also had been settled that, at that time of year, migrant families who lived and worked in St. Kitts would travel back home to Nevis to interact with family. Of course, if I say 51 years ago, that points to a very long time, and also it is also a long and undisputed history that people were lost, some of them who, at least have my own lineage, which I would go into at some other time. I won't go into the lineage part. But on that day, Mr. Speaker, practically every family in St. Kitts and Nevis suffered the loss of someone, be it a biological family or just a friend of the family. I, Mr. Speaker, was a young man, enjoying my summer vacation, having just completed my second year as a teacher. I take that back, Mr. Speaker. I was not a man. I was only 16, 1 month away from my 17th birthday. On that vessel, that day, Mr. Speaker, was a gentleman named Joe Moore. Joe Moore was one whom I will consider, who I've described many times as my surrogate father and mentor. One who taught me, Mr. Speaker, everything that there is to know about repair of vehicle engines. Mr. Speaker, I could take your car engine out and put it on the ground and start it without the body. I can do all of that. I can remove pistons and put in connecting rod bearings. I'm familiar with that. I know how to grind suction cup. Valves with a suction cup to make sure it's properly seated to avoid it missing. I did all that when I was a young son. He taught me all of that. So he was a mentor to me in many, many ways, but that in particular. In fact, I was so schooled in mechanics that if my grandmother had not taken my head teacher's advice to send me back to school, I may very well have been on that boat, because that was what my mentor brought to me, and I really enjoyed doing that. And for those of you who think that I still can't fix vehicles, it's only the technology will beat me, but the mechanics are still the same. The fire nowadays is 1342. Still know those things. I know about compression and torque. You hear the language. There you go. Mr. Speaker, Mr. Speaker, on that boat that day was Frank Tyson, his brother. Frank Tyson was the mate. I understand he may very well have been at the steering, at the wheel at the time, at the controls at the time. There was Adup, or a fellow we call Barfish. Real name is Aubrey Wilson. Still living in Cayon, and Lord, he was outraged the other day when he heard so many things about 1st of August and nobody spoke to him. So he said, after he started talking, I said, I must at least, say something today on this Christina disaster. Of course, there was Vincent Morton, a fellow called Rassi, whom I knew since he was driving tractor, nicknamed Fox. Charles Henry, used to call him Sheik or Techie. And of course, you had a Joseph Roberts as well from Upper Cayon. And then you had a James Weeks from Montserrat. They used to call him a Nancy or Freco. Mr. Speaker, of those 9 or 10 people who I knew as persons working on the ship, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 of them were from Cayon, Yes, Mr. Speaker, and all 6 of them survived. And so, Mr. Speaker, on that day I lost my teacher, Willie the Car. Sonia Carr's husband is her brother. Everybody know Willie Carr. We lost the postman from Cayon, Sherwin Bertie, very popular chap, Sherwin Bertie. My close neighbor, Leontine Daniel, whom I lost, Percy Daniel, and Percy Daniel's sister, that's the mother. Then there was an Ezekiel Daniel. We used to call him quarter cheese. And of course, Mr. Speaker, Ivan Smitten, who is also from Nevis but also lived in Keon. In fact, Mr. Speaker, I must say that my first child's grandmother was saved by a bag of breadfruit on that day. Her name is Dulcita David Brown. David. And you know, on that day she had 5 of her children with her. Mavis 9, Christina 8, Joseph 7, Carl 3, and Verna 2. Verna was just 2 years old the day before that day when she died. Such a huge loss. Thankfully, she lived until 2017 or 18, I think, and she died at the age of, yes, she died on October 10, 2017 at the age of 86, 4 days before her 87th birthday. So, I am quite familiar with quite a lot of the people who suffered that day. Speaking about other, he liked to be called Jack Palance. He reported that, you know, the Sea Hunter and other small vessels may have done some saving of lives, and this is why he wanted me to mention Miss Pomeroy, who was owner of one of those vessels. He also reported to me that a cargo ship passed by and just passed and kept on sailing. Kept on sailing, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, it was a fateful day. And it is so close, we are now so close to that particular day that I thought it was important that in this Parliament at this time, that at least acknowledge that important day. Well, important is not the best word. That fateful day. That day that will live in infamy. And that, if it pleases you, Mr. Speaker, maybe you may even want to ask for a minute's silence on behalf of all those who lost people on that day. May it please you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, Honourable Member. I think it is quite fitting for us to rise in a moment of silence, because I am not aware, it may have been done in the past, but I have no objection to that. A minute of silence, please. Please, in memory of those who perished 51 years ago on the MV Christina. Thank you. You may be seated.
Speaking on the adjournment, Mr. Speaker, please permit me to make 3 small references. Firstly, I would like the House to join me in applauding the 2 youngest members, youngest in terms of time served in this Parliament, the first anniversary year, member for number 1, and the Senator on this side, Dr. Clark, who just in a matter of days would have marked their first year as members sitting in this Parliament. I think it is worthwhile that we recognize them. They have made significant contributions to date, and I'm sure that they would be here for a very long time to give human service to the people of St. Kitts and Nevis. Secondly, Mr. Speaker, very quickly, I want to also recognize a number of persons who have passed recently and who have served directly or whose children have served directly in public service. I mention in particular a young man called Daniel Dickinson of St. Paul's, who served for very many years in the sugar industry, and when it was closed, he then went on to work with Casper, and he died only a few weeks ago, and so I bring words in his memory today. Secondly, there's a gentleman out of Parsons Village, originally from St. Paul's, lived in Parsons, also lived in Taylor's, died, in fact, was buried yesterday. Abraham Henry Bradshaw, everybody knows him as Hamidodo. Everybody knows him. A builder, a businessman, a contractor, building contractor, worked for many, many years in the electricity department and also eventually in Skellec, and worked for many years in public works. He was buried yesterday. Then finally, there are three people who I would want to also give words of commendation and words of condolences to the family. We have Gloria Bart Bryan James of Newton Ground, who has a grandson I should say, who is doing yeoman service in the Ministry of Health, especially serving with the COVID-19 team in a technical support way. I want to recognize him and, of course, let him know that despite the challenges that he was going through serving our country, his grandma passed. And also there is another lady, Frances Ann Nelson of St. Paul's. Her mom is one again on the front line in terms of COVID-19 service. She's an EMS. She's part of the EMS team, emergency medical service team. Drives the ambulance, has been called out many times during the pandemic and shutdowns that we've had. And during all of this, our mom passed recently at home. And finally, Pauline Rollins of St. Paul's, one of the young pioneers in St. Paul's, in the Anglican Young People's Association, and a foundation 4-H member. I just want to bring their memory to us and hope that these words will bring comfort to the families who are left to mourn their loss. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Mr. Speaker, if I may, with your permission, thank you. Simply to join my honourable leader of the opposition in expressing condolences to the families in constituency 6, in particular to those of Frances Ann Nelson. She is very close and related to my family, and I've had many years of experience traveling to the US Virgin Islands when she was there. She took care of my brother and I and really showed us a grand time, and she was very loving, and so I want to express condolences to the family on her passing. Permit me also to express gratitude to Dr. Douglas for acknowledging that just a couple days from now would be the 1-year anniversary of not just our appointment to my appointment to this honorable house, but also I think it was August 13th, in which I made my first comment on adjournment. And I want to emphasize that this has been a very humbling journey. It's been one of many lessons. Sometimes we have self-doubt. We don't, as young women, believe that our voices should be heard. Sometimes we wonder if what we are saying makes sense, if we are interpreting. But I want to use this opportunity to say to all young women in particular that here in Parliament, we have been given a seat at the table. And when young people are offered this opportunity, we should speak up, we should spread out, we should establish that we are here and we deserve to be here. And this goes for any situation. Your contribution is important. Young people are change makers. We're seeing that they are the ones who are driving needed change, not just politically, but in terms of social development, environment, gender issues, which I'm very passionate about, and I'm very happy to have had the opportunity to speak on them. I want to also thank Dr. Douglas, because not many people are able to embrace the future as he has. He sits here in Parliament with a senator from number 6, and for some that would be scary, but this is suggestive of a person, of a leader who is willing to accept the future, who gives young people a chance, who instead whose name has been dragged, but he is proving that he believes wholeheartedly in young people, in young women, and in the future. And so for me, that speaks volumes, because we can't see that for every member of parliament. Some people would be too afraid to do that, so I'm very thankful. Thank you. And so I want to end by saying, in particular, that as women, being here with 4 other women in parliament, so being here with 4 other women in parliament, and 5 other women in parliament rather, we're part of history. And we have a responsibility to empower other young persons to be interested in politics. We have a responsibility to show young people in St. Kitts and Nevis that we are not all the same. Some of them are very politics averse because they think it's the same rhetoric, it's the same behavior. But I'm proud to be here with women who bring statistics, who comment when they need to comment. We're not here to play Dolly House, we're here to move forward legislation for this country. And so I'm really happy to have had this opportunity. Thank you.
The time will come for that. Well, Mr. Speaker, I rise on the adjournment of this Honourable House to, first of all, second the adjournment. However, as I'm on my feet, Mr. Speaker, and in the absence of the Minister with responsibility for sports, I take the opportunity to congratulate and to commend 2 young persons from the Federation of St. Kitts and Nevis, Amaya Clark and Jason Rogers, who participated in the 2020 Olympic Games being held in Tokyo, Japan. Both individuals, Mr. Speaker, did an excellent job in their respective races that they competed in. We are indeed proud of them, Mr. Speaker, proud of the fact that we were able to have 2 young persons represent us on the world stage and competing amongst the best on the world stage. Again, I say congratulations to both individuals. Jason, of course, hails from my own constituency, Sandy Point, and I do believe that Amaya hails from the Tabernacle or the Christchurch area. And our father is from Newtown, since the member for number 1 would also want to be associated with her. But the fact is that regardless of where in the Federation they are from, that they would have done an excellent job in promoting and representing the Federation of St. Kitts and Nevis. The second thing that I wish to do, Mr. Speaker, is to extend congratulations to Skelec, which is celebrating 10 years of service to St. Kitts. Skelec, as we know, is the electricity company, and it was 10 years ago which it came into being, having been corporatized what was then the St. Kitts, what was then the electricity department. It continues to do an excellent job in terms of powering homes and businesses here in St. Kitts. Thirdly, Mr. Speaker, I extend condolences to the family of Nellie Mills. Nellie hails from Sandy Point. You would have heard from the member for number 8 that she works at Social Security. To her family members, of course, her mother, Carmen Mills, You have a brother who works at the park. Most persons would know him as Barber. His right name is Glenville Mills. You have Elvis Mills, who persons would know as Dr. Elvis or Kiddy, who is also a brother of Nellie. And to all of the other family members, I extend on my own behalf of the people of Sandy Point, and of course, on behalf of this Parliament, condolences to them. May it please you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you. The Honourable. To all honourable members for presenting on the adjournment. Is there anyone else? Thank you. On that note, this Honourable House stands adjourned, sine die.